Good Monday to everybody in Gov 603. Welcome to week, boom, 10. It is official. We have passed the halfway mark for the semester because, 16 weeks. Hang on. Let me get a little tea this morning. I am, believe me, sufficiently caffeinated. I've been up for a bit, although I don't look it. It's allergy season, so if I have a lozenge or in this case, a little piece of gum, that's why. Okay. Delicious. Okay. For this week, I'm going to give you two videos, and this is the first of the two. This video, I'm going to review your midterm exam, explain the answers to the questions. Hang on to them because you might see the questions or some variation of them for the final exam, which is comprehensive. And then the second video, which I'll post a little bit later today, I will talk about, or maybe even tomorrow, I will talk about the material for this week. All right, this week we are going to start, for the back half of the exam, we're going to start applying what we've learned in empirical research to some actual calculations. All right, so you get some sort of hands-on, and I'll post that material here in just a little bit because, we're on like a Monday to Monday. I don't like having things due on the weekend for you. I like to give you that space if you need it, because I know a lot of you work, you have other things you want to catch up on, you have family, you have, maybe you just want to take a little bit of a break. Okay. So that will be the second video. Okay. Let's take a look at the midterm exam. Now, before I start going through the questions and explaining them, why they are what they are, if you received a note, or a comment in the comment section of your exam from me, and or an email. I don't think I missed anybody, but I tried to make sure if I sent you a note that I send you an email, and specifically a note to the effect of giving you a score of 0 as a placeholder for your exam. You need to make an appointment with me as soon as possible to have a Zoom call. That means there's a couple things I got to go over with you before I can finish grading your exam. So if you received one of those comments, and there are at least 5 of you, and I've only heard from 2 of you, so 3 of you still need to get in touch with me. Make sure that you do so ASAP. And yes, we have to make an appointment, and yes, we have to connect by Zoom. And that means you need to be in a place where you can use video, because that's what Zoom does, is use video. All right. So very important. If you receive that from me, make sure, I'm going on with this hat of mine. Make sure that you reach out, and preferably this week. All right. That we get this taken care of. Okay. Let's take a look at the exam now, because one of the things that the Canvas does, the module does, is it randomizes the questions depending on who's taking it. I'm going to go through the questions, and they may or may not have appeared in this way for your exam. So you might have to, cross match. All right. Okay. First question: recreational research is best defined as research intended to satiate one's intellectual curiosity about a phenomenon. So, look, recreational research can have a design, but it can have external validity depending on how many subjects are in there. But the point of it is not really to apply it to the external group. It's just for you to kind of find out if there's anything there. Okay. The following image is an example of the one with the dots. That is a scatter plot. It's not a dot matrix or a plotting cluster. All right. Some of you put dot matrix. That is not correct. Scatter plot, that is the question with the graph and all the blue dots across it. Okay. Briefly explain the difference between correlation and causation. Now, if I give you half credit or partial credit, usually I'll give you, a short explanation or remember. And this is very simple. Remember, correlation means 2 things are happening at the same time, but there's no indication that the one is causing the other. Okay, there's no indication that they are dependent upon each other. They just happen to be happening at the same time. Now, yes, of course, it often happens that things that happen simultaneous to one another or in sequence to one another are causing each other. Fair enough. But that's not always the case. Causation is when you can demonstrate that the one thing is causing the other. And in fact, this week, one of the tests, empirical research tests that I'm going to walk you through, is one that will demonstrate percentage of causation. That is, how much of what happened, what percentage of what happened was likely caused by this happening, this first happening. Okay, so what percentage of the dependent variable turned out the way it turned out because it was driven by the independent variable. That's the difference between correlation and causation. Briefly explain why empirical research needs a design. I was looking for something like it needs a design in order to establish favorable circumstances, so you can test your hypotheses, you can test your research questions, you know what data you're supposed to get, you know how to handle your data, and you have a solid methodology that could be repeated. I mean, the whole thing. All right. Because in empirical research, conclusions that are not repeatable are not considered valid. If I couldn't go out and gather the data in the same way that you did, subject it to the same test that you did, and then get roughly, because you get a little differences, but get roughly in the same neighborhood that you did something wrong, and you need to lay that out for your readers. Okay, question next, number 5. Why is it hard for some researchers to see their blind spot? The correct answer is researchers sometimes lack intellectual humility. Not that they're not sufficiently caffeinated. They may not be, or that bias is encouraged in academic research, and they are sometimes nearsighted, but that's not the reason. Okay, number 6. A hypothesis is comprised of which of the following 3 elements? The answer is at least 2 variables, a causal prediction of one variable to another, and a causal direction of one variable to another. And I've talked about that in videos a lot. Okay, that one you should have just gotten. Boom. How do you determine the mean of a data set? Okay, that one. And some of you, put down numerical answers. That's good. That is, you take all the numbers, add them up, and divide by the number of the numbers. So if you have 5 numbers, you add them up, you divide by 5. If you have 10 numbers, you add all the numbers up, you divide by 10. And that gives you the exact mean, which is right in the middle. True or false, according to Alan Smith, people should be interested in statistics because statistics is the study of us. That's true. That's why. Okay. Or empirical research, for that matter. True or false, the Pareto distribution predicts that 80% of the work is done by 80% of the workers. That's false. The Pareto distribution predicts that 20% of the work is done by 80% of the work is done by 20%. And that, and it's an interesting formula, because if you run it for, where does most of the money come from for taxes? Where does most of the votes come from in elections? Or applying it to things that are found in the political science realm. It comes out right now. It's not exactly always 80-20, but it's really close. Really close. Sometimes it could be 90-10, sometimes not often. The number that tends to grow is the number of people that aren't the major contributors. That doesn't mean they're not contributing at all. Okay. But when you're looking at that bell curve, the distribution curve, it's really from the center line and then out. Okay. Until the curve really starts to drop off. That's the core of the people doing the thing. And that's about 20% or less. Okay. True or false, a good literature review should contain an article-by-article summary of the scholarly pieces you read. That is false. A number of you said that was true, which puzzled me. I've gone over this in the videos a lot. That's not what a literature review is. That's an annotated bibliography. Question 11, why should we be cautious of a single causal explanation regarding an individual's behavior? Remember the bit you read on Van Gogh? Because people are complicated. I mean, that's basically what I was looking for. And there is really no such thing as a single causation in human behaviors. Now, what you can find is a major causation or a dominant causation when it comes to human behavior. And this is particularly applicable in political science. But beware, if you read studies and say, this is the only thing, or not just studies, even statements. I mean, people that just say, it's this one thing that's keeping all of this from happening or causing this to happen. Watch out for that. Question number 12, why should a researcher be concerned about the relationship between two or more variables? Well, because the answer here is determining causal relationship between two or more variables is basically what you're trying to do. That's the whole game. That is fundamental to the entire process. Question 13, what is external validity? The answer is external validity is the degree to which the findings of a study can be generalized to a larger population, which is also, unless you're engaging just in personal recreational research, which is also the point of your research. Question number 14, briefly explain the difference between qualitative and quantitative research methodologies. So a lot of you did not get this one, or you sort of, remember, both methodologies can have hypotheses and research questions. So some of you said, quantitative research has hypotheses, qualitative has research questions. No, they both can have both. One deals with qualitative research deals primarily with text, and that text can be in the form of historical documents, compilation of material like articles that you find, oral interviews with people. Both of them can use surveys. Some of you said, the one has surveys and the other one doesn't. No, that's not true. They can both use surveys to gather their data. It's the type of data that they are focused on dealing with. Quantitative is dealing with numbers. Now, interestingly, you can take the very same study and do it either qualitatively or quantitatively. Let's say you wanted to know, what did people think of the State of the Union address? You could set up a survey with numbers assigned to the answers and run a qualitative or quantitative study. You could and hand that to people as a survey. You could set up a survey that just asks people to fill in and share their thoughts and run a qualitative content analysis of certain words that they used over and over. That I thought the president seemed angry, or I thought the president seemed motivated, or passionate. Okay, just depending on how somebody sees this. You could study the same phenomenon with either qualitative or quantitative research. Question number 15, true or false, research that lacks good external validity could be characterized as recreational research. False. Even if something has external validity, that doesn't mean that everything else has been done well. Okay. That's not recreational research. That was a bit of a tricky question. A lot of you missed that. Question 16, which of the following is another term for the 68, 95, 90, 99% rule? Confidence interval. Remember, and this applies to quantitative research, and you're going to see some of that this week. All right. That what in effect you're saying is that if this thing happens 99% of the time as we expect it, there's no external force. If this thing happens 95% of the time as expected, there's no external interference. Let's say, for instance, the classic example, and I've used this one for you, the flipping of a coin. Okay, flipping of a coin between heads and tails will give you about a 95 on average. If you did it a whole bunch of times, let's say you flipped it 100 times in 5 sets, 500 flips, and each of those sets, those 100 sets, you wrote, one of them down to 100, one of them down to 100, and you recorded the number of heads, tails, heads, tails. When you averaged it all out, you would see between each of those, not 50-50, about 95% heads or tails. So someone would be like, 52-48, 52 heads, 48 tails, these sorts of things. Not exactly 50 heads, 50 tails. You'd see this little variation. If the variation is greater than that, so it's not a 95% split, let's say it's a 90% split or an 85% split, then this tells you there's some other force acting on this coin flip other than just random. Random is really a bad word. Let's say designed outcome. The way a coin is designed, the outcome should be 95% of the time a split between heads and tails, or higher. Could be 100, but at least that's the very bottom. All right. But let's say when you do your 100, 100, so you flip it 500 times and you average all those numbers together, you find that the split between heads and tails is like 90%. This tells you that there's another force involved beyond designed outcome. What could that force be? I don't know. Maybe it's a trick coin and it's heavier on one side. Maybe the person who's writing down, so you're flipping, so you could just get through this because you got 500 flips and you're calling heads, tails, and there's somebody writing it down. Maybe they're writing it down wrong. That could be a force and influence. Okay. This is called the confidence interval. In other words, this is the level at which you're confident, the interval, the amount at which you're confident that the thing that you predict should happen happens. Now, 99%, these high confidence intervals, these are used in things like medical experiments, drugs. If you give somebody a drug, and actually, in some, depending on the drug, what it's supposed to do, they have an even higher confidence interval. It's like 99.5. Okay. If something else happens that is more significant than what the drug was intended to do, then they call that the side effect. If the side effect is higher than 0.5%, 1%, the drug does not make it to market. All right. In most cases, there are some exceptions. We're going to talk about that. So that is the confidence interval. All right. Question 17. According to Pounder, which of the following should not be covered in the methodology section of a research paper? A number of you got this wrong. The thing that should not be covered is what a methodology section must contain. Don't explain what's supposed to be in the section. Just put the stuff in the section that's supposed to be in the section. So what should go in the section? Well, you should talk about how what is the data? Where'd you get it from? How did you collect it? And how is it going to be analyzed? Those things go in. Question 18. Which of the following is best definition of stratified random sampling? A process by which a population being studied is divided into subgroups or strata based on specific characteristics or attributes such as age, gender, income, location, and so on. Most of you got that right. Question 19, briefly explain how a hypothesis is different from a research question. Okay, so remember, the first major difference between the two is a hypothesis makes a prediction. Research doesn't. Research question is just open-ended. What if, or does it occur? How often does it happen? Or does it happen at all? That's the heart, the core of a research question. I'm out of tea now. A hypothesis is making a prediction. I predict that as this goes down, this goes up, or as this goes up, this goes down, or as this goes down, this goes down, or whatever the relationship is. Okay, so that was the major thing that I was looking for. Question 20. Which of the following best defines empirical research? And the answer is empirical research relies on verifiable, observable data to confirm, disprove, or answer stated hypotheses or a research question. A stated hypothesis or research question. And you can have both hypothesis and research questions in quantitative and qualitative research. Okay, question 21. The line graph that's a line graph. It's not a dot-to-dot graph. Some of you got that wrong. Question 22. Which letter represents the number of cases or data points in a study? Lowercase n. Remember, larger n represents everything in the general population. Lowercase n. Question 23, true or false, the sampling error helps to evaluate how representative the sample for a study is of the whole population. True. Okay. If you see a study with a high sampling error, and sampling errors can be driven by a number of things. It can be driven by lopsided values in the data. So for instance, if you want to find out how the general public votes on an issue and you have 80% women and 20% men, well, that's not the percentage split between the general population. That's going to be a sampling error. Or if you want to find out what eligible voters think of President Biden and 10% of your sample is under the age of 18, well, they can't vote. That's a sampling error. Okay. So this tells you how it relates to external validity. Question 24, why should good research begin with a literature review? Here I was looking for something like, you need to show to your readers that you understand the problem by going through what's already been done. So you're current with the research. You need to explain the major parameters of what it is you're going to be covering in the research. You're setting the stage and letting your readers know, I know this subject matter. I know this area of study. I've done my research. Okay, that comes out in a literature review. Okay. And then, I think some of you even cited that, in videos, how I say that it's like going into a party and you're standing next to a few folks having a really interesting conversation. Listen to what's being said before you chime in, because you might stick your foot in your mouth and look like a fool. Last one, question 25. According to Powner, an analytical narrative is not a valid tool for testing a hypothesis. False. It is a valid tool. In fact, it's a very good one. Okay. All right. Again, the answer or the questions may have come up in a different order in your test, but jump around and use this video to get what you got wrong, and take note, because some of these questions you will see in some form on the final exam. Okay, everybody, that's it for this one, about 20 minutes. Remember, if you received a comment from me on your exam or an email saying you've got a 0 as a placeholder, you need to get in touch with me like right away. All right, I've got a couple things to go over with you. I'll post the material for this coming week here today, and then a video explaining it. And welcome back. I know, hard to come back, but you're halfway around the track, folks. Hang in there. You're going to do it. Okay. Everybody have a blessed week, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.